It seems more and more individuals, corporations, and groups with sincerely held religious beliefs are coming under attack for taking positions contrary to the orthodoxy we see in the wider culture. Is a war against religious freedom being waged here in the United States? My next guest thinks it could be the case. He's vice president and senior counsel at the Becket Fund and author of the book Free to Believe, The Battle Over Religious Liberty in America. I spoke with him recently here in Washington. Here's my interview with Luke Goodrich. I want to start with this before getting to your incredible book. I just mentioned the recent case of a presidential candidate calling for the end of tax-exempt status for religious institutions who do not support same-sex marriage. Here is Beto O'Rourke at the LGBT town hall last week. This is CNN's town hall. Watch.
There can be no reward, no benefit, no tax break for anyone or any institution, any organization in America that denies the full human rights and the full civil rights of every single one of us. And so as president, we're going to make that a priority, and we are going to stop those who are infringing upon the human rights of our fellow Americans.
Luke, your reaction to what Mr. O'Rourke seems to be proposing there, and is this attitude toward religion on the rise in the work that you do defending religious liberty?
Absolutely. Beto's comments are really a frontal assault on religious freedom, but for anybody who's been paying attention, they're really par for the course. A lot of progressives have been trying to liken traditional religious beliefs to a form of bigotry, comparing them oftentimes to racism, and then seeking to use all the powers of the federal government to stamp out those beliefs. So his comments are deeply concerning, but they're also not actually that new.
Luke, Attorney General Bill Barr made headlines this week after speaking on secularism at the University of Notre Dame. I want to play some of his comments and get your reaction. Watch.
Secularists and their allies have marshaled all the forces of mass communication, popular culture, the entertainment industry, and academia in an unremitting assault on religion and traditional values. These instruments are used not only to affirmatively promote secular orthodoxy, but also to drown out and silence opposing voices and to attack viciously and hold up to ridicule any dissidents.
Luke, your reaction to that, it almost sounds like he's talking about a culture war.
Yeah, I think Attorney General Barr really hit the nail on the head, and our culture has shifted dramatically in the last 25 and even 5 years to where traditional religious beliefs that were once broadly accepted throughout our culture are now viewed as a threat to modern culture. And you see progressives increasingly trying to stamp those religious beliefs out. So I think it's very important that Attorney General Barr is calling this out, and the reaction on the left shows that he was really over the target here.
Now, Luke, I want people to understand you really are the foremost expert in this area. You defended the Hobby Lobby, the Green family in the Hobby Lobby case, the Little Sisters of the Poor. You've been on the leading edge of defending religious schools who are feeling their rights being infringed upon. And Barr called out these attacks on religion in schools particularly, government interfering in the teaching of passing faith along to kids. Here's what he said.
Ground zero for these attacks on religion are the schools. And to me, this is the most serious challenge to religious liberty today. For anyone who has a religious faith, by far the most important part of exercising that faith is teaching that religion to your children. The passing on of the faith. There is no greater gift we can give our children and no greater expression of love. And for the government to interfere in that process is a monstrous invasion of religious liberty.
Luke, are you seeing more cases like this where schools you're representing are facing greater threats from government intrusion?
Absolutely. I'm representing 3 schools right now in the Archdiocese of Indianapolis, and those schools are Catholic. They teach Catholic values to children, and they had 3 educators in those schools enter same-sex marriages in clear violation of their own employment contracts and in violation of Catholic teaching. And yet those teachers are now suing the Catholic schools, trying to soak them for hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars in damages. And these sorts of threats are multiplying across the country. So that's why it's critical to stand up for the rights of all religious organizations, especially religious schools, to teach in accordance with their religious values.
Going back to that equality town hall that CNN held earlier in the week, Beto O'Rourke and Julian Castro both issued, Cory Booker as well, they all issued almost threats to those who don't adhere to a particular organization, Human Rights Campaign vision of marriage, love, what a family should constitute, and that they would penalize religious believers should they deviate from that. Now, there's been some back off in the ensuing days. Elizabeth Warren and others have said, no, that's not really what we meant. People can believe what they want to believe. But they all, everyone on that stage, every Democratic candidate, are supporters of the Equality Act, which was passed by Congress in May. Tell me what the Equality Act would mean practically in the lives of Americans.
Yeah, the Equality Act is an aggressive attempt to advance gay rights across all areas of human life: employment, housing, public accommodations, and it includes no exemptions whatsoever for religious organizations or religious liberty. And so this conflict between the advance of gay rights and religious liberty is really one of the biggest religious freedom issues today. And the real question at stake, Americans are deeply divided on questions of sex and religion. And the question is the government going to pick one side of the debate on human sexuality and then crush and punish everyone who dissents? Or is the government going to find a way to respect both sides of this debate and allow everyone to live together in peace?
Can you respect both sides of this debate? Or is there a clash of rights here? I mean, I had an attorney this week I had a conversation with, and he said basically what people like you, Luke, are doing, you want to codify discrimination into the code and not allow these people to love who they want to love and marry who they want to marry. What would you say to that?
Yeah, the religious organizations that I'm representing are not trying to stop anyone from marrying. I mean, right now, I'm helping represent Catholic Social Services in Philadelphia. And for over 100 years, Catholic Social Services has been recruiting families to provide loving homes for foster children. But the city of Philadelphia recently decided to shut down Catholic Social Services solely because it doesn't place children with same-sex couples. But the fact of the matter is, no same-sex couple has ever come to Catholic Social Services and asked for placement. And there are over a dozen other adoption agencies in Philadelphia that do precisely that work for same-sex couples. So the question is simply, will the government live and let live? Will it let Catholic organizations like this that have been doing this work since long before the city of Philadelphia even got involved, will it let them continue doing that work and continue providing loving homes for needy families?
I want to talk about the Little Sisters of the Poor for a moment. You've been representing them. They're back in court, which I find unbelievable. I mean, we're talking about a, 2016 Obama-era rule, HHS rule, which compelled all employers to provide contraceptives and abortifacients to their employees. Now, the nuns got they wanted repeated victories in the courts. You had the Trump administration come to power. They changed the rule in question. Why are you still in court?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I ask myself the same question just about every day. But the problem is you have several attorney generals in blue states that simply won't leave the Little Sisters alone. And so they've sued the Trump administration, arguing that the religious exemption that the Trump administration adopted is somehow unlawful and unconstitutional. So we are back in court again on behalf of the Little Sisters of the Poor, making the same argument that the government does not need to use nuns to give out contraception and abortion-causing drugs. And we've appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and I feel very confident that we are going to win this case again. And once and for all, the Little Sisters of the Poor are going to be allowed to get back doing what they do best, caring for the elderly poor.
You know, Luke, I was on Fox News this week, and I pointed this out, that it shows you the long arm of bureaucracy, that even when you win, even when rules are changed, the person at the citizen is still subjected to the heavy boot of bureaucracy. It doesn't go away, particularly in this area of religious liberty. It sometimes takes an awful long time for the gears of justice to grind in the direction of justice.
That's absolutely right, and we've seen that historically as well. I go into this at length in my book, but the fact of the matter is religious freedom in this country was not won without cost. It was won by people of faith who were sticking to their conscience, even in the face of tremendous government oppression, just like the Little Sisters of the Poor. And they stuck to their conscience, and they ultimately prevailed. And so that's what we're doing. We're just coming alongside. That's the joy of my job, is I get to come alongside people of faith like the Little Sisters, and simply take a stand for them. And at the end of the day, we are going to win.
Luke, you write in the book, in Free to Believe, you identify 5 areas that exhibit the greatest challenge to religious liberty today. Let's address those. Religious discrimination, abortion rights, gay rights, Islam, and the suppression of religious expression in the public square. Why do you mention Islam?
Well, one of the biggest challenges today is the rise of minority religious faiths, non-Christian religious faiths. And for many Americans, they're not sure quite how to react to that. But in the book, I argue that part of defending religious freedom means defending it for people of all faiths. And I offer a number of reasons why that is. Number one, all of our religious freedom hangs together. If we undermine it for one faith, it's undermined for all. And ultimately, religious freedom is a fundamental human right. It's how we relate to God, free from government interference. And it's unjust for the government to take away religious freedom, no matter what the faith may be.
Speaking of mandates, which we discussed earlier, the so-called transgender mandate was struck down by a federal judge in Texas. Now, this was attached to an Obama-era rule that would have required doctors to perform sex change operations. How significant is that ruling?
It's very significant. That was our case. I represent Catholic hospitals and Christian doctors across the country. And this regulation would have forced them to violate not only their religious beliefs, but also their medical judgment, because these gender transition procedures, they're highly controversial, and the data shows that in many cases they can actually be harmful. So we went into court and said, not only do these doctors have a religious belief, they also have medical judgment. And the government shouldn't be forcing these doctors to violate their Hippocratic oath to do no harm. So we're very grateful that the judge ruled in our favor, ensuring that doctors can continue practicing medicine in accordance with their judgment.
Luke, you've worked on so many of these high-profile religious freedom cases. What do you see as the most daunting challenge, the stalking horse, if you will, vis-a-vis religious liberty in the days to come?
I think the biggest challenge to religious liberty today is how we're going to handle the potential conflict between gay rights and religious liberty. And you saw this with the comments from Beto on tax-exempt status, but there is a strong current on the left to treat traditional religious beliefs about marriage and sexuality as an immoral form of bigotry and marshal all the power of the state to crush it and punish it. And what we need to do as people of faith is to stand firm in our religious convictions and make the case that government should not be picking sides and crushing traditional religious beliefs, but needs to protect religious freedom and allow religious people to continue doing the good work they've been doing for centuries.
Before I let you go, tell me about this case at the Supreme Court about Title VII, which deals with employment discrimination. What's at stake here?
So the court's hearing 3 cases on employment discrimination, and the question is whether federal law bans employers from discriminating based on sexual orientation or gender identity. And our organization filed a brief in the Supreme Court highlighting the religious liberty implications, which is the fact that hundreds, even thousands of religious organizations across the country have traditional beliefs about human sexuality and expect their employees to live in accordance with those beliefs. So if the Supreme Court in these cases dramatically expands federal employment discrimination law, all of these religious organizations will suddenly be exposed to new lawsuits and new potential liability. So our argument to the court was, don't just unilaterally expand the law in this way, rather give Congress a chance to consider it, because Congress can balance the competing concerns between gay rights and religious freedom.
Wow. Luke, we will check in with you in the days ahead. Luke Goodrich's new book, Free to Believe, The Battle Over Religious Liberty in America, is available at bookstores everywhere. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.